Hello everyone, my name is Stephanie Duran and welcome to my presentation for Info 281, Seminar in Contemporary Issues, topic Crisis, Disaster, Health Informatics. To vaccinate or not to vaccinate, how misinformation in traditional media and social media has impacted willingness to vaccinate during a pandemic. Controversy to vaccinate is not a new phenomenon. It's something that people have been pondering over for decades. However, what has changed is the way we obtain our information, and misinformation for that matter. People are relying on the internet, and specifically social media platforms, to obtain health information as compared to using traditional media like newspapers and television news. As we venture into the world of the novel coronavirus, obtaining factual information is more crucial now than ever before. Although the mass media has traditionally been influential in changing people's attitudes in the past, social media outlets have more influence over people because they have the capacity to reach millions of people in the least amount of time. Unfortunately, there is a multitude of anti-vaccine propaganda all over the internet, and this is detrimental to our future as a society as we cope with the COVID-19 pandemic, because social media outlets have the power to influence people's willingness to vaccinate. Background. Although the bubonic plague and cholera pandemics ravaged the world before the 18th century, it was the 18th century smallpox outbreak that can be credited for prompting the first vaccine to be developed against a contagious disease. According to the CDC, smallpox was a devastating disease that killed 3 out of 10 people. Fortunately, in 1796, English doctor by the name of Edward Jenner developed the smallpox vaccine after experimenting on his gardener's son by inoculating him with the material of a cowpox sore, then exposing him to the varroa virus. But not everyone was happy with the smallpox vaccination, and anti-vaccine movements began to emerge. The smallpox vaccine was such a hit that the British Parliament made it a requirement in the mid-19th century. However, many opposed to this new mandate, proclaiming that it was unnatural or that it was a sinful practice, and later formed the Anti-Vaccination League in London in opposition to this new mandate. After riots and tumultuous pressure from the anti-vaxxers, the British Parliament decided to pass a law in 1898 in which it no longer gave penalties to those who did not vaccinate their children. Another noteworthy time where vaccinations met headlines was around the mid-1970s, where news reports surfaced that suggested that children from the Great Ormond Street Hospital for Sick Children in London suffered neurological issues after being vaccinated with the DTP vaccine. Also, in 1998, British doctor Andrew Wakefield and 12 colleagues published a paper in The Lancet that suggested a link between measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine and the development of autism in young children. Even though this paper was later debunked, Dr. Wakefield's allegations still drew public attention to the controversy, as it was reported heavily by newspapers and the television news media. Topic: Significance. Vaccination misinformation, why it matters. With over 1.4 million deaths worldwide associated with the novel coronavirus, studying how the mass media and social media influences people's choice to vaccinate during a pandemic is more crucial now than ever before. Misinformation about vaccination not only jeopardizes the trust people have with health professionals and the government, but it also hinders any efforts we have as a global community to end the COVID-19 pandemic and other future pandemics. Literature review. Studies suggest that there is more negative vaccine-related content found in Facebook than in both YouTube and Google. with 35% of Facebook subscribers leaning towards anti-vaccine content, while only 15% of YouTube viewers are shown to be vaccine skeptical, and 70% of vaccine-generated searches on Google were pro-vaccine, as opposed to 5% that were vaccine skeptical and 3% were vaccine discouraging. In addition, there was more vaccine chatter on Twitter after the 2014-2015 measles outbreak. Anti-vaccine films are more readily available to the public than ever before, thanks to the internet, and are being shared at alarming high rates. For example, the docuseries Vaccines Revealed homepage claims that it has over 29,000 shares on Facebook as of October 2019. There's also a multitude of anti-vaccine propaganda online, claiming that vaccines cause a series of side effects, like the vaccine propaganda shown on the slide that was found online, claims that vaccines cause asthma and eczema, among other things. Zimmerman also pointed out that anti-vaccine websites claim that vaccines are contaminated, promote the idea that the vaccines are only temporarily effective, encourage alternative medicine, claim conventional medicine is wrong, make emotive appeals, and make ethical allegations about conspiracy, cover-up, civil liberty violations, and immorality. Considering that most people spend more time online than they do any other activity, it's not a stretch to think that the internet can potentially influence people's perceptions about vaccines, whether positively or negatively. Interesting enough, a study conducted by the Annenberg Public Policy Center of the University of Pennsylvania demonstrated that predominant social media users were more misinformed about vaccines than traditional media viewers. Before the internet took the world by storm in all things information, most people received their health information from traditional sources like newspapers and television news media. Traditional media was a trusted source for millions of people before the internet became commonly popularized. Consequently, when news articles and television news began to report a link between possible side effects and vaccination, people believed them and became hesitant to vaccinate their children, as we saw in 1974 with reports about the DTP vaccine resulting in brain damage making headlines, and in 1998 when the mass media widely reported on Dr. Wayfield's claim that the MMR vaccine caused autism. Misinformation on traditional media outlets and social media platforms have not only impacted willingness to vaccinate, but also influenced the anti-vaccine movement during a pandemic. In fact, the mass media has shown its ability to alter viewers' minds on several subjects, including childhood vaccination. For example, after the WRC network aired a TV news special later known as the DPT Vaccine Roulette documentary, it caused a major uproar by claiming that the standard DPT vaccination routinely administered to children was dangerous and caused brain damage. This resulted in a decrease in childhood vaccinations. On another note, vaccine information on social media platforms are always fact-checked, leading to the spread of vaccine misinformation, which does not vote well for social media users who rely on social media outlets for their health news. After traditional news media over reports on anti-vaccine controversies, and social media outlets become flooded with misinformation about vaccines, people become more frustrated and emotional about not knowing what happens next during a pandemic. At the end, fear of the unknown takes over, and by the time a vaccine is ready to help eradicate a pandemic, more people will have joined the anti-vaccine movement because vaccine misinformation reached them before the pro-vaccine health campaigns had a chance to. Although misinformation on traditional media outlets have hindered pro-vaccination efforts by sensationalizing vaccine side effects in the past, we must recognize that misinformation found on social media outlets have more power to influence people's willingness to vaccinate, as it has the capacity to reach millions of people in the least amount of time. Unfortunately, vaccine misinformation has also shown to decrease populations from getting vaccinated, hindering pro-health campaigns' efforts to detain and eradicate a disease. In times of a pandemic, where vaccinations are needed to stop disease-related deaths, anti-vaccination movements hinder any efforts in containing a pandemic. If anti-vaccination efforts persist and are readily advertised on social media outlets, it may be harder to eradicate the world from the now COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you for watching this presentation.